Please welcome Bishop of the Eparchy of St. Maron of Brooklyn, Gregory Mansour.
I want to express my thanks to Ambassador Brownback and Commissioner Lantos Sweat and all the collaborators of this 2022 International Religious Freedom Summit. I'm proud to say that, in fact, with this effort, I have come to every summit since we began 4 years ago. The stories that we hear are heart-wrenching, but the courage that we see is beautiful. To believe in religious liberty is to find joy in advocating alongside other religious leaders to promote the primacy of conscience, equal citizenship, and the abiding truth that governments are responsible to people, not the other way around. Governments are not an end in themselves, but a means to an end, and that end is to guarantee all citizens the God-given right to pursue their deepest held convictions, to practice according to their conscience of faith privately and publicly without fear. So 200 years ago, 246 years ago exactly, the United States was, quote unquote, conceived in liberty, as President Abraham Lincoln once said, with a conviction that government is by the people and for the people. Interestingly enough, in the Middle East, Lebanon, where some of my ancestors hailed from, 102 years ago, was also conceived with a desire for liberty. So after years of oppression and having suffered much under the Ottoman Turks, the Maronite patriarch, at the age of 76, traveled from Lebanon to Versailles, France, in 1919, along with the Sunni, Muslim mufti, and other religious and civil leaders. They urged the Allied leaders to carve out a nation of Lebanon, not for Christians alone, but for Muslims and Christians alike. Lebanon's boundaries were intentionally drawn so that the country could become a refuge for Catholic, Orthodox, Sunni, Shiite, Druze, Jewish, and even people of no faiths at all. Lebanon, from its very inception, would defend the God-given right of each person to exercise his or her religious freedom. For this reason, Pope John Paul II called Lebanon more than a country, quote, a message for East and West. Yet Lebanon, the experiment of Lebanon, is at risk and very much needs our support. Today we meet in advocacy in Washington, D.C., to advocate for religious freedom everywhere. We work diligently and firmly to believe that the best way to govern is by a robust religious freedom for all people. No nation, no power on earth can ever justify the denial of religious freedom. Nations that flourish with religious freedom flourish with the well-being of their citizens. In fact, where religious freedom is lacking, so many other basic rights that make us who we are lacking. I'd like to conclude with 3 profiles in courage. First, I told you about that patriarch who traveled in those days, not easily, 1919, from Lebanon to Versailles. He traveled with courage because many Christians wanted him to defend their cause and have a small enclave and ask for a small Lebanon where only Christians would live. He defied that instinct of self-preservation, and he insisted on a Lebanon that included Christians and Muslims, Sunnis, Shiite, Druze, in a Lebanon that would always be a refuge and a place of religious freedom. It was a profile in courage and an experiment that still is, the jury is still not out. But the beauty of the fact that a man could sit down with his co-religionists of his own nation and say, even though we're afraid of further difficulties, we are not afraid of living together in a social harmony. That's the first. Second, recently, and it came from the young people of Lebanon, a group called Adyan, which means in Arabic, the faiths. A group of Christians and Muslim students rallied their co-religionists and their brothers and sisters. There are Muslim feast days in the Lebanon civil calendar and Christian feast days. They created a Muslim Christian feast day called the Feast of the Annunciation, March 25th. And they go from school to school and place to place as a profile of courage to say that Christians and Muslims can find a beautiful way of conviviality. That's the second profile of courage. Brothers and sisters, the third profile in courage is each one of you here. Many of you have come at great risk, but you have come with the principle that religious freedom and the ability to follow our conscience no matter the cost is a deep human right and a deep human need. So brothers and sisters, you are the third profile in courage. May God give us the courage to be truly free, to follow our deepest longings, and may God guide us to what is good and eternal. And thank you.